They tried to bury it under silence, to frame your rise as coincidence, to pretend your name hadn't become a storm echoing through rooms they once ruled. Classified, they said, as if secrecy could disguise inevitability. But truth doesn't stay buried. It leaks through tone, body language, and nervous glances. You feel it in the way they pause mid-sentence when you walk in, the way their laughter sounds forced, the way their eyes search for cracks in your calm. Fear makes people predictable. They try to suppress what exposes them, but suppression only magnifies what they fear. The world sees it now. The power you carry isn't a secret anymore. It's a vibration. You don't announce yourself. You don't demand acknowledgement. Yet their reactions give everything away. Their panic is the headline. Their silence is the confession. You sense it long before they admit it. The shift in the air. The weight of attention when you enter a space. They don't clap, they calculate. They don't congratulate, they assess. Because deep down, they know something has shifted permanently. You've become the variable that ruins their equations. They used to underestimate you because invisibility made them comfortable. Now that you've outgrown their narrative, they can't control the perception anymore. They whisper your name not with dismissal, but with caution. That's how fear evolves. It starts as mockery and ends as surveillance. You were never meant to fit their system. You were meant to expose its limits. You didn't have to announce a takeover. You simply stayed consistent until your existence became undeniable. You never needed validation, but now you watch it unfold anyway. The slow unraveling of their composure. Power isn't about dominance, it's about awareness. You see everything they try to hide. The tone of fake curiosity, the compliments laced with envy, the hesitation behind their smiles. They can't disguise discomfort because your presence is proof that their control was temporary. They thought you'd depend on permission. Instead, you built without approval. That independence burns them. They tried to gatekeep opportunity, but you made success public property. That's the irony. They spent years trying to stay exclusive, only to realize the world's now watching you, not them. The secret isn't that you succeeded. The secret is that you no longer care who notices. There's a psychological shift when someone's perception of you changes faster than their ego can handle. You've triggered that in them. You weren't supposed to evolve. You were supposed to stay predictable, dependent, manageable. You shattered that illusion by outgrowing the stage they built for your failure. They call it arrogance when you stop shrinking. They call it luck when you start winning. But you know what it really is: alignment. You stopped negotiating your worth. You started moving with intent. That kind of clarity can't be hidden. It radiates, whether you speak or stay silent. And that radiation doesn't destroy, it exposes. Every hidden agenda, every false ally, every fragile superiority, all of it unravels under the light of someone who's no longer pretending to be small. They call it worldwide news as a joke, but it's true in its own way. Energy travels faster than words. People talk. The right ones listen. The wrong ones panic. You've become a reference point, a reminder of what happens when someone refuses to stay boxed in. They study you now, but it's not admiration. It's analysis disguised as curiosity. They're trying to decode how you broke through the same walls they still serve. They'll call it mystery to save face, but what they really mean is discipline. They fear consistency because it exposes laziness. They fear clarity because it dismantles manipulation. You didn't need to broadcast your rise. The world sensed it through the way your silence grew heavier than their noise. Fear spreads faster than truth. They tell themselves they're just being cautious, but it's panic in disguise. They watch your movements, dissect your decisions, hoping to find flaws they can exaggerate. Yet every attempt backfires because your growth isn't performative. It's structural. You didn't just change. You rebuilt the foundation they tried to shake. That's what unnerves them. They can't trace the moment where you stopped seeking approval and started writing your own criteria for success. You no longer fit in their hierarchy because you outgrew the need for it. They think power is ownership. You've learned that power is freedom from needing to be owned at all. They tried to control your narrative, but narratives collapse when the protagonist starts thinking for themselves. You stopped explaining your moves. You stopped giving interviews for opinions that don't matter. And in doing so, you made them irrelevant. They can't control what they can't predict, and unpredictability has become your trademark. Every time they try to define you, you evolve again. That's the real reason they're afraid. It's not your potential, it's your refusal to plateau. You keep rewriting the rules, and they're still studying the old version of the game. While they debate who you are, you've already become something new. Their fear is poetic. It's not rooted in what you've done. It's rooted in what they sense you can still do. They've seen people rise before, but not like this. Not with this calm. Not with this precision. You don't need to announce threats because your composure feels like one. You don't need confrontation when presence itself becomes resistance. They see that now. You don't fight their systems. You move past them. You've learned that winning doesn't always mean taking their power. Sometimes it means making it obsolete. They thought control came from attention. You showed them control comes from detachment. And nothing frightens power more than the person who no longer wants it. You understand psychology too well now. You know the cycle. First they ignore, then they mock, then they fear, then they follow. You're watching it happen in real time. The same ones who ridiculed your focus are now mimicking your tone. They hate admitting it, but you've become their reference for relevance. They'll deny it publicly, but privately they adjust their pace to match yours. That's how quiet influence works. It doesn't scream. It whispers in results and habits, in the small, consistent things that can't be copied. Their fear is a compliment they'll never articulate. It's the sound of the system realizing it's no longer in control of the narrative. The narcissists are mad because they've lost the thing they need most: control over your perception. They used to feed on your reactions, shaping your emotions like clay, turning your empathy into their currency. But now, you've taken back the one power they cannot steal: awareness. You've stopped playing their script, stopped supplying energy to their theatrics, and that has shattered their illusion of dominance. They crave attention more than air, and you've made their oxygen scarce. You no longer respond to the bait. You no longer explain your piece. That silence is psychological warfare to them. It drives them insane because it forces them to sit with their own emptiness. They need you to validate their false importance. You, however, learn that validation is self-generated. And that's the one supply they can never manufacture on their own. Their madness grows louder when they realize manipulation no longer works. You see through every tactic: the guilt trips disguised as concern, the passive insults dressed as jokes, the emotional blackmail wrapped in charm. You learned to recognize patterns before they could unfold. You stopped giving second chances to people who never deserved the first. Narcissists depend on predictability. They need to know what button to push to make you bend. When you removed the buttons, they panicked. They called you cold, ungrateful, detached. But what they really meant was untouchable. They don't hate you for changing. They hate that you can now see the puppet strings they once kept invisible. You discovered that narcissists don't want relationships. They want reflections. They look for people who can mirror back the image they project, not challenge it. You refuse to be that mirror anymore. You stopped flattering mediocrity. You stopped tolerating their false superiority. That's why they're mad. Your self-respect exposes their emptiness. When you stopped catering to their ego, you forced them to face the void they've been avoiding. They can't stand it. They can't survive in environments where admiration isn't guaranteed. They thrive in chaos because chaos blurs responsibility. You, however, brought order, and order terrifies them. Because order means accountability, and accountability dismantles delusion. The psychology of a narcissist runs on dependency. They construct power by making others question their reality. You refused to participate in that gaslighting loop. You started trusting your intuition again. You began seeing actions instead of excuses. You learned that no apology matters if behavior doesn't follow. They can't manipulate someone grounded in self-awareness. That's what broke them. Their entire game depends on confusion, and you've become clear. They depend on drama, and you've become calm. You didn't need revenge. You needed distance. They don't know how to fight distance. It doesn't react, it doesn't bleed. It just ends the game quietly. and that silence feels like a loss they can't recover from. They call you arrogant now, but that's projection. They can't handle the version of you that no longer bows to emotional theatrics. They label your boundaries as cruelty because it limits their access to your empathy. Narcissists mistake kindness for weakness because they've never experienced genuine love. They've only known manipulation masked as affection. You stopped feeding that illusion. You learned that compassion without discernment becomes self-destruction. You stopped rescuing them from consequences. You stopped explaining your boundaries. You stopped making yourself small to soothe their fragility. That's why they rage. They can't comprehend that strength can coexist with peace. They can't accept that power doesn't need applause. You became their reminder that control built on deception collapses the moment truth enters the room. Their anger is really panic in disguise. They sense they've been exposed, but their pride won't let them admit it. So they lash out, spreading rumors, twisting narratives, trying to reclaim relevance. You've seen it before, the smear campaigns, the sudden concern, the desperate attempts to rewrite history. They do it because they fear being forgotten. Narcissists don't want closure, they want continuation. They crave conflict because it keeps them connected to you. When you stop engaging, they lose their grip on your story. You didn't just walk away, you erased their power source. Now they're left talking to themselves, narrating a version of events no one believes anymore. That's the ultimate punishment: irrelevance. You realize that you can't cure a narcissist. You can only starve them. Every reaction, every argument, every emotional exchange feeds their ego. You chose withdrawal over warfare. You let them destroy themselves through their own repetition. The same manipulation that worked once now looks ridiculous. You've grown past their illusions. You don't need to explain how they hurt you. You simply stop allowing it. They hate that. They'd rather you scream than stay silent because silence is final. It means they no longer matter. And that's what breaks them. Your peace became their enemy because it proves they never had real power, only borrowed attention. They pretend they're unaffected, but you can see it in their behavior. The nervous over-talking, the forced laughter, the subtle attempts to reinsert themselves into your narrative. They'll try to make you question your reality again, hoping the old dynamic returns. But you've evolved beyond reach. You've learned that closure doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from indifference. Narcissists don't understand indifference because it holds no emotion for them to manipulate. You're no longer their victim, you're their lesson. And the cruelest part for them is realizing that you didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves trying to destroy you. They're mad because you turned their game inside out. You mastered emotional control, something they'll never possess. You don't need to prove your intelligence through argument or dominance. You prove it through detachment. You've outgrown the need for approval entirely. They can't mimic that because imitation requires authenticity to begin with. You've shown that quiet confidence always outlasts theatrical arrogance. They can't understand how someone can forgive without returning, how someone can move on without needing to explain. That's what haunts them. They expected retaliation and got rebirth. They expected collapse and got composure. You didn't win by fighting. You won by exiting the battlefield entirely.